Hello. So I wanted to make kind of a guide or just a how-to on creating a wallpaper similar to this one. This is the last wallpaper I posted as of the time of recording this video. It features a planet that spins and there's a moon, but the moon is essentially just the exact same as the planet with a different texture on it. And there's a little sun in the background, but that's just a picture of the sun. There's nothing actually going on with that. So my starting point is a texture. So what you're looking for is if you just Google planet texture or seamless texture, you should get something similar to this. And I'm just going to make a few changes to this just for the sake of making some changes. So I'm going to duplicate it, set it to multiply. That's going to darken it. You don't have to do that. I want like an icy planet. So I'm going to hue saturation, change this so it's blue-ish. And then I'm going to go into color balance and change the shadows to be a bit darker blue and change the highlights to be a bit tealer blue because I want like an icy, think like a frozen block of ice. So this is my planet texture. I'm going to merge all of these together. And then this texture is a 4K texture. It's too big for the memory usage that we're going for. So I'm going to go to image size and change this to 1024. I'm just going to half it. And then I want to make sure this is still seamless. So what I'm going to do is grab my rectangle tool and cut it, or duplicate this half. And then select everything, move this half over to this side. I'm sliding it over here. And then take this layer and shift it over and make it so that they line up again. So this should, it's almost seamless. And you know what? For the sake of this demo, it's seamless enough. You can repair this. As a matter of fact, I'm probably just gonna merge these, create a new layer underneath them. And there's a slight line there. If I zoom out, can you see it better? No, not really. I'm just gonna paint dump this color underneath it. So there's a slight transparent line. I don't know if you can see it. I'm hoping that paint dumping this color underneath it will fill in that line. But obviously the seam is minor enough that I can't see it right now, so I'm just going to assume it's okay. So this is our planet texture, and I'm going to save it out as planet texture.png. Now we need a few other art assets here. So I'm going to go File, New, and create a 1000 by 1000 72 resolution, yes, RGB. So 1000 by 1000 canvas. I'm going to unlock this, create a new layer, and make a circle. And you want the circle to be smaller than your frame, smaller than your canvas. We're going to paint dump black in here. And I have that backwards. We want this to be white, and we want this to be black. So this is our mask that we'll be using to make the circular planet. But in addition to this mask, we also need another layer. So I'm going to create a shadow that's going to look something like that. So I'm making a circular selection, and then I'm going to press Control-Shift-I to invert that selection to select the opposite, and then paint dump this with black. And I also want to put this somewhere else. We'll put it like here, here-ish. You can make whatever shape shadow you want, but this is going to be, the light is hitting here, and this half of the planet will be in darkness. I'm also going to blur this a little bit. Add filter, Gaussian blur, and then get something how you want it, like this. Okay, there's a little bit of an overlap up here. It doesn't really matter, but just for the sake of fixing it, I'm going to add in these parts where it kind of overlaps and just fill these with black. So now we have this mask and this mask. So we need to save this, the black and white circle, as our opacity mask. And then we're going to re-enable this layer and call this shadow, save as, shadow mask. And then the last thing we need is we're going to select our, or we're going to duplicate this layer, the circular layer. I'm going to hide this mask. I'm going to set this fill to 0%, and I'm going to double click it to open up layer styles. We want an inner glow and an outer glow. We're going to set them both to white, normal. 1 second, I have to hide this. So this is what we're looking at here, this edge. So we want the outside to extend just a little bit, but not reach the edge. If it reaches the edge, you're going to have weird clipping issues with your mask because it's not expecting it to reach the edge. And then our inner glow, set it also to white and increase the size. So what we're doing right here is we're creating the kind of atmospheric highlight. So we're going to do something like that, set this to normal. And now we can also, I'm going to control click my mask layer, which makes a selection of it. And then I'm going to click on this button down here, the add layer mask on the bottom right, which is going to break what we just did because I did it wrong. So we have to apply these effects to the layer. So I'm going to create a new layer and merge these together. So these are now permanent and it's essentially an invisible circle. So I hope that makes sense. Now I'm going to do this again, control click this layer and hide it with a layer mask, and it's hiding the opposite of what I want. So I'm going to control I and invert that layer. So now we have a highlight going around the edge. So we're going to save just this highlight by itself. And I know this is kind of fast Photoshop stuff, but you can rewatch this part if you need to. I'm going to call this atmosphere PNG save. So I think now we have all of our art assets together. So we're done with Photoshop, and we can open up Wallpaper Engine. I'm going to create a new project, use a template, a 2D scene. We'll call this planets. We want our background to be black, so come into the cogwheel and set our background to black. We will not change anything else right now. So the first thing we need to make is stars. Make stars by going to not the stars preset, but just a basic particle system. And then we're going to change some settings. We don't want them to move. We don't want velocity. We don't want color random. And we don't want to use sphere random. We want to use box random. And we're going to make a grid that is 1920 by 1080, so like monitor size. This might break if I don't know how well this is going to be supported on high resolution monitors, but I'm assuming it's going to stretch properly. We're going to change our size to something like 6 pixels and 2 pixels minimum. So I don't even know if we can see them right now, but if we launch this as it is, we get like single stars. So we have to increase the amount of stars. So system max count, I'm going to choose 3000 just from doing this before. And now we need to go into our emitter. Oh, set our lifetime. You don't want the lifetime to be the same number, because if it is, for this particular case, if it is, then all of your stars are going to spawn, they're going to reach their maximum, and then since they're all the same age, they will all despawn at the same time, and then they will respawn. So you'll get your stars will turn on and off instead of fading in and out one at a time. So instead of twinkling stars, you're going to get like all of your stars are on, and then all of your stars are off. So we're going to make the time 12 and 6. So they have a potential to be twice as long. And then the only other thing you have to change is the rate. So we have 3,000 potential particles. We want to increase the rate until it's right around 3,000. So if we go 200, this will give us 500, 700, 900, 1300, 1500, 16. You have to wait the 12 seconds, 17. So we need a bit more than that. We'll go 350 and see what it counts up to again. I mean, you could just make this a really, really high number, but I think that's a bit more taxing on the system. So this caps us out. So I'm going to go just below that, hopefully 330. And then one other thing you can do is go into System and set your start time to something like 30 seconds. So what that does is when this particle system starts, instead of beginning the simulation, it will begin pretending that we're 30 seconds into the simulation. So actually, if I undo this, when I select this, the stars will slowly fade into existence. But if I instead set this to 30, it will pretend that this has already been running for 30 seconds, and it will instantly generate stars. So this is what our background is going to be. And actually, just for the sake of doing it, I want to add a bit more. So we're going to go System, we'll go 4,000 stars. And we're going to increase our rate to 370. So we're going to refresh the system. Now we have more stars. And actually, our star field is too big. So it comes to, I know everything here is black and you probably can't see it on YouTube, but essentially our field ends right here, but our screen is in here. So we can actually shrink this down until we're all inside. I hope this is visible on YouTube. It's just going to be tiny little dots. So now it's sized approximately the right amount. And I'm going to make the stars a little bit bigger. So there. Now we have our star field. So the next thing to do is bring in our art assets. So we're going to start with our texture. Bring it in. Bring in our opacity mask. Bring in our shadow mask. And bring in our atmospheric highlight. So you only need the texture. You just need to bring those assets in so we have access to them, except they're not in my assets list. I don't know why. Now they're in my assets list. Okay, so just refreshing the program. Hopefully you don't have to do that. Okay, step 1. On your planet texture, we're going to add a scroll effect somewhere. Here. We're going to get rid of the Y scroll, which is the up and down. So now it's only moving left and right. We can control the speed with the speed slider. So I'm going to set it to something fairly medium right now. And we will also need a transform effect. And we're going to set the Y of the transform to 0.8, 0.9. And I'll get into what we're doing with this later, but essentially there's a bit of overlap. These textures are designed to be applied to a spherical planet object in a 3D rendering program, and that is not what we're doing. We are making a fake version of that. Okay, so we have our texture. We can hide that. Next, you're going to add a composition layer, and our texture was 2048 pixels by 1024. We want, or our opacity mask is 1000 by 1000, so we're going to make a 1000 by 1000 resolution composition layer. It is invisible right now, but we're going to add a blend texture to it, and then drag our planet texture into the blend texture field. Now, you might be able to see the color change, but it's set to multiply, so that just makes it darker. So we're going to set that to normal, and like magic, now we can see our texture. So the next thing we're going to notice is that, actually, I don't know if you can notice here. The first thing you're going to notice is it's squished. So to unsquish it, you have to go into your composition layer and add another transform. And what this is doing is, because the transform is below the blend texture, it's affecting the blend texture. So it's not affecting the size of the composition layer, it's affecting what is being displayed on the composition layer. So we're going to set the X scale to 0.5, which is going to render half of our image on the composition layer. So now, just for the sake of showing it, I can kind of put this exactly where it would line up on our image, somewhere around here. Now if I zoom in, you're going to notice this side's really blurry and this side isn't. So to fix that, we can actually just double the resolution of the composition layer and then half its size. And now, other than this seam, they're virtually identical. So that fixes that. It takes up a bit more texture memory, but not a whole lot. So we can again hide our planet texture. And now we have a scrolling texture. So we have to add the rest of the assets to it. So we're going to add another blend texture. Now the order of these might not be correct. So we're going to import our shadow mask and set it to multiply. It already is, and I'm going to change the multiply. The multiply slider is how much this is affecting it. So if I set it to lower, it fades in and out. You actually want it to be like 0.995. Maybe a bit less, 0.985. So I don't know how well you can see this, but if you make this project on your own, you'll see that it's not completely dark. You can actually see through it. So it's in shadow, but it's not black, which is a better effect. Okay, go back into your composition layer, and we're going to add an opacity mask, and we are going to import our opacity mask. So this cuts off the edge of the circle. So now we have a planet-shaped planet, and I'm just going to move it into a position that I like. And I think it's one of our final things. So we're going to add another layer, the fisheye effect. So this is how we get the planet shape. So if I make this smaller, the fisheye effect creates like a 3D bubble almost in what we're looking at. So because we made this all square, it's creating a sphere. And now we just have to change the distortion amount. So I'm just going to lower it down a lot and change the size so that it goes right to the edge of our texture. Right there-ish. And then we change, actually, just so it's easier to see, I'm going to hide the shadow. And now you can see the distortion is going to create a sphere. So this is how we make our planet into an actual spherical object instead of a flat texture. And if I go back in, and this is the transform we added earlier, if I set this back to 1, it squishes it, but because we're not mapping this to a spherical object, the top of the texture is this weird mess that we're trying to hide, so we're just stretching the texture higher. And that mostly fixes it. You can't really notice it. Again, we're not exactly mapping this to a 3D object, we're just kind of faking it in Wallpaper Engine. So turn our shadow back on, and we got our fisheye. Oh, the only other thing we have left is our, where'd it go? Atmosphere. Gonna add our atmosphere layer back on. You can't add the atmosphere layer to the composition layer, because if you do, the opacity mask will cut off the outside. In fact, I'll just show you. I don't know why I'm saying that. If we add a blend layer and we add the atmosphere to it, and we set this to normal, the inside of it is showing, but the outside of it is not. And that's exactly what we don't want to have happen. So instead, what we're going to do is just add it as its own layer. We're going to copy the transformations of the composition layer and paste them into the atmosphere. And that's going to center it directly in the right spot. And then we just have to increase the size. It should be just 1. So now we have this atmospheric highlight coming from the light. And we can add a tint layer to that. You could color this in Photoshop, but the tint layer will now let you could reuse this art asset with anything and then just color it. So we're going to add a tint layer. We're going to color picker, I don't know, some color off of the planet, like there. So that's mostly it. I hope this helps. Some stuff you can do with composition layers and how to make a semi-3D-ish looking planet. I don't know what else you can do with this, but yeah, if you come up with some good ideas, let me know.